My golden sister got pregnant at 13, and my parents forced me to wear a fake Reddit family tales. Please stay with me as I tell my story. And please, do not forget to support our channel by subscribing to our channel, liking our videos, and sharing your loved ones. Your support means the world to us. Now to our story. Poke. I always knew my parents treated my sister better, but I never thought they would ruin my life to protect her. She was their golden girl, perfect grades, pretty smile, always the center of attention. I was the shadow, the one they criticized for every little thing. When she got pregnant at 13, the house felt like it had stopped breathing. My parents didn't cry or yell. They just looked at each other, then at me. That night, they told me the plan. I would pretend to be the one who was pregnant. They even bought a fake belly online. It's for the family's reputation, they said, like that made it okay. I was 16 and terrified. At school, whispers followed me down the halls. Friends stopped talking to me. Teachers gave me pitying looks. At church, women pulled their children away from me as if I was contagious. My sister, meanwhile, stayed home, smiling in her room, her secret safe. The lies didn't stop there. I overheard my parents telling neighbors I had made bad choices and brought shame to the family. They didn't just cover for her, they destroyed me to make the story believable. One afternoon, I walked past my sister's room and heard her laughing with a friend about how stupid I looked. Something inside me hardened. I started writing everything down, dates, conversations, even taking pictures of her with the baby clothes my parents hid in their closet. Months later, my chance came. At my grandmother's birthday party, the whole family was there. I stood up to give what everyone thought would be a polite toast. Instead, I told them everything. I pulled out printed messages, photos, and even a recording of my parents admitting the truth. The room went silent, then erupted. My grandmother cried. My uncles shouted at my parents. My sister tried to deny it, but the proof was undeniable. Finally, she broke down and confessed. I walked out before anyone could stop me. By the next week, I'd moved in with an aunt who believed me from the start. My parents tried to call, but I blocked their numbers. My sister's perfect image was gone, and my parents' circle of friends vanished overnight. Now, I'm finishing school, working part-time, and saving for college. I'm finally living without their lies weighing me down. They wanted me to carry my sister's burden forever, but instead, I gave it back to them in front of everyone who mattered. And that was the day I stopped being their scapegoat and became my own person. The first day I walked into school with the fake baby bump, I felt every pair of eyes on me. Whispers followed me from the lockers to my desk. Some girls stared openly, others smirked, and the teachers acted extra careful when speaking to me. My parents had insisted I wear it every day, even sending me out with staged photos to make the story believable. They posed me in front of the house, at the park, even holding a tiny blanket. At first, I thought maybe my sister felt guilty. But one afternoon, I overheard her on the phone telling her boyfriend how smart she was for convincing me to take the fall. She laughed, saying he'd stay with her because now no one would suspect her. That moment, I realized she wasn't just letting this happen, she was making sure I stayed trapped in it. The damage came fast. A letter arrived from the scholarship board telling me my award was revoked. They didn't want to support a student who might not finish school due to personal circumstances. Years of work and dreams were erased because of a lie. The only person who seemed to doubt the story was my aunt. She had always noticed the way my parents favored my sister, and she didn't believe their version. She started asking quiet questions, visiting more often, and offering me rides so we could talk without being over. I told her just enough to keep her searching. Things changed when social services showed up after an anonymous tip. They wanted to ensure my baby would be safe after birth. As part of their process, they asked for a DNA test to confirm parental rights. My parents tried to refuse, but my aunt insisted. She even drove me to the appointment herself. When the results came back, everything fell apart. It proved I wasn't the mother. My aunt took the papers straight to the next PTA meeting, where half the parents from school were gathered. She waited until my mother finished talking about supporting young mothers before laying the test results on the table. She explained exactly what had happened in front of teachers, administrators, and parents who had believed my family's story. No one spoke for a moment, then the room erupted. My parents tried to deny it, but the proof was there in black and white. My sister turned pale, and her boyfriend walked out without a word. By the end of the week, my parents' friends had stopped answering their calls, and my sister's social life collapsed. The scholarship board reviewed my case after my aunt sent them the truth. A month later, I got my award back, along with an apology letter. It wasn't just about the money, it was about knowing I had my future back. My parents have tried to contact me since then, asking to talk things over. I don't respond. They were willing to destroy me to keep their image clean. Now they can live with the mess they made. I have no intention of going back. My world cracked open the day I saw the papers. My own birth certificate had been altered to show I'd had a baby at 16. I stared at the document, my name listed as mother, and felt sick. Later, I learned my parents had bribed a hospital clerk to make it official. That way, there would be no questions about my sister, and the lie would live in the records forever. They pulled me out of school soon after, claiming I needed to focus on the baby. The isolation was suffocating. Friends drifted away, and I had no one to confide in. The more I thought about it, the more I realized something didn't add up. One night, while searching online, I discovered falsifying documents like that was a felony. When I confronted my parents, they didn't deny it. Instead, they threatened to disown me if I ever spoke about it. They said I'd never survive without them. I pretended to agree, but inside I was already planning. Quietly, I contacted a lawyer I found through a legal aid website. I explained everything, how the documents had been faked, how I'd been pulled from school, and how the truth was being buried. The lawyer didn't just believe me, he said we could prove it. His plan was simple but risky: record my parents admitting what they'd done. I hid a recorder in my pocket during dinner one night. My lawyer had told me exactly what to say to get them talking. Sure enough, my mother bragged about how clever it was to fix the paperwork, and my father laughed about how no one would ever catch them. Every word was captured. With the recording and other evidence, my lawyer went to the authorities. Within weeks, an investigation began. My sister was questioned and, under pressure, admitted the truth. She even told them about the hospital clerk who took the bribe. The day of court, I walked in with my lawyer at my side. My parents sat across the room, avoiding my eyes. The judge listened to the recordings, the testimony, and the hospital's own records showing the edits to the certificate. It was undeniable. In the end, my parents were found guilty of fraud and conspiracy. They were fined heavily and sentenced to probation, along with a criminal record that would follow them forever. The court also granted my request for emancipation, giving me full legal control over my own life. I was free to go back to school, free to make decisions without their permission, and free from the constant manipulation. I left the courthouse that day with my head high. My parents had tried to erase my future to protect themselves, but instead, they destroyed their own reputations. The lie they built became the proof that brought them down. That was justice, and I wouldn't trade that feeling for anything. It started with a single post on my parents' Facebook page. A photo of me, wearing a fake baby bump, standing in the living room with my head down. The caption read, "We're disappointed, but we'll support her through this." Within hours, the picture was everywhere. People from school shared it, strangers left comments, and my phone filled with notifications I didn't want to see. The online bullying hit hard. Classmates sent me cruel messages, old friends unfollowed me, and even people I barely knew felt free to judge. Every time I opened my phone, I saw another insult or rumor. My sister didn't hide how much she enjoyed it. I caught her scrolling through the comments, smirking, and once she even said, "Guess you're finally getting attention." I knew words wouldn't clear my name. I needed proof. So, I bought a small camera and kept it hidden in my room. I started recording whenever my parents came in to talk, hoping they'd slip up. After weeks of waiting, it finally happened. My mother told my father she was glad our plan worked, and that no one suspected my sister. My father laughed, saying, "It's perfect. She takes the blame, and we keep our reputation." The moment I had the recording, I copied it to my laptop and then late one night, I uploaded the video to my own Facebook account. I wrote just 2 words as the caption, "The truth." By morning, the post had exploded. Hundreds of shares, thousands of views, and comments from people who couldn't believe what they'd just watched. Former friends messaged me apologies, saying they wished they'd known. The story spread so fast that a local news station reached out, wanting an interview. I agreed, and they aired a segment showing the video and explaining everything that had happened. The pressure on my parents was immediate. Neighbors stopped speaking to them, church members confronted them, and eventually, they posted a public apology admitting the truth. Even then, they tried to excuse it as protecting the family, but no one seemed to buy it. Meanwhile, I began hearing from people I'd never met, strangers who wanted to help. Some shared their own stories of being lied about or mistreated by family. Others offered resources for legal help or education. A small group even started an online fundraiser to help me rebuild my life. With that money and some scholarships I applied for after the truth came out, I was able to move out. I rented a small apartment near the college I'd dreamed of attending. For the first time in years, I felt like my life was my own. My parents' lie had been meant to bury me, but once exposed, it became the reason I finally broke free. And the same social media that once destroyed my reputation was what gave me the chance to start over. I was in the middle of class when the announcement came over the speaker, calling me to the principal's office. As I walked down the hallway, I could feel the stares. When I got there, the principal and a counselor were waiting. They wanted to discuss the rumors about me being a pregnant teen. I didn't even bother explaining. My parents had made sure the story sounded believable to everyone. What no one at school knew was that my sister's boyfriend was much older, old enough that their relationship could land him in serious trouble. My parents knew it too, and instead of protecting me, they decided to protect him. Their way of doing that was to make me the target. If everyone thought I was the one who was pregnant, no one would look at my sister, and no one would dig into who she was seeing. I kept quiet for weeks, but every insult, every sideways glance at school, pushed me closer to snapping. One night, my sister left her phone unattended in the kitchen. I picked it up and started scrolling. What I found was exactly what I needed: messages from her boyfriend, making it very clear how old he was and how long they'd been together. I saved every screenshot, sending them to an email account my parents didn't know about. Then I reached out to the school social worker. She listened without interrupting, her expression hardening as I showed her the messages. She told me to keep everything safe and that she'd make sure the right people saw it. A week later, I was told to come to a school board meeting. I walked into the room to see my parents sitting stiffly in the front row, my sister next to them, and 2 police officers standing by the wall. The board members were there, along with the social worker. When it was my turn to speak, I stood, opened my folder, and laid the printed messages on the table for everyone to see. The silence in that room was heavy. One officer picked up the pages and read them, then nodded to the other. They walked over to my sister's boyfriend, who had come to support her, and placed him in handcuffs. No one moved as they let him out. The aftermath was quick. My parents were questioned for obstructing the investigation and for knowingly protecting him. My sister was sent to live with relatives in another state, away from the attention the case had drawn. The school cleared my record, and every rumor about me vanished overnight. The next Monday, I walked into school without the fake belly my parents had forced on me. Heads turned, but this time there were no whispers, no smirks. I held my head high, knowing the truth was out, and the people who had tried to ruin me had lost everything they were trying to protect. My grandparents had always been kind to me, but once my parents told them I was a wild child who had gotten pregnant, everything changed. They stopped calling as much, and when we visited, they looked at me with disappointment instead of warmth. My sister, as always, was painted as the perfect one, the good daughter who never caused trouble. I didn't know how to defend myself without proof, so I stayed quiet. My parents made sure the story spread to every relative. At family gatherings, I caught whispers and judgmental glances. It hurt more coming from people I loved. Then something happened that I never expected. My cousin, who lived in the same town as my sister's secret doctor's office, spotted her sitting in the waiting room of a prenatal clinic. At first, she thought it must be a mistake, but when she saw my sister's name on the sign-in sheet, she knew exactly what was going on. She didn't say anything to me at first. Instead, she went straight to my grandparents. From what I was told later, my grandmother was furious, and my grandfather didn't believe it, until my cousin showed them a photo she had taken outside the clinic. My sister was clearly pregnant, and there was no way to hide it. That weekend, my grandparents called for a family meeting. Everyone was there: parents, cousins, aunts, uncles. My grandparents sat at the head of the table, the photo on the table in front of them. My grandmother asked my parents to explain. My father tried to lie again, but my cousin spoke up, telling everyone what she had seen and when. The room erupted. My aunts and uncles demanded answers. My grandparents raised their voices for the first time in my life, and my sister sat pale and silent. My grandfather told my parents they had one chance to fix this or risk being cut out of the family inheritance entirely. By the end of the meeting, my parents had no choice but to admit what they'd done. My grandparents insisted they call every relative they'd lied to and tell the truth. Over the next week, my phone lit up with calls and messages from family members apologizing for believing the worst about me. The shift was immediate. My grandparents not only cleared my name in front of the whole family, but they also decided to give me part of my inheritance early, saying I'd been through enough and deserved a fresh start. That money allowed me to plan for college and move toward independence. As for my parents, the damage was done. They lost the trust of the family, and with my grandparents reducing their share of the inheritance, they were left struggling financially. For the first time, I saw them face real consequences, and I didn't feel sorry for them one bit. The auditorium was silent as I stood at the podium in my graduation gown, looking out at rows of faces. My speech was about truth, how it can be buried for a time but will always find its way out. I didn't mention my parents, but every word was for them. 2 years earlier, they had forced me to pretend I was pregnant at 16. The fake belly, the whispers, the humiliation. It cost me my boyfriend, most of my friends, and the trust I'd built with so many people. They thought breaking me down would keep their secret safe forever. What they didn't know was that I never stopped working toward my goal. Late at night, after everyone was asleep, I studied. I applied for scholarships using a private email address they didn't know existed. I poured all my energy into my schoolwork, determined to create a way out. Months before graduation, I got an email that made me cry with relief. I'd been awarded a prestigious scholarship that would cover all my college costs. When my parents found out, they tried to block it, telling the board I was unfit for the honor because of my history. That might have worked, except the scholarship board reached out to me directly. They wanted to hear my side. I told them everything, from the day my parents came up with the lie to the years of living under its shadow. I sent proof, including the documents and photos I'd kept hidden. A week later, the board called back. Not only was I keeping my scholarship, but they wanted to feature my story in their national campaign for the following year. They said it was about resilience, about rising above injustice. I agreed without hesitation. When the campaign launched, my face was on their website, in brochures, even in short videos online. The truth was out for anyone to see. Neighbors, teachers, and extended family finally learned what had really happened. My parents couldn't escape it. The image they had worked so hard to protect crumbled in front of them. As for me, the campaign brought in even more opportunities. Other schools reached out with offers, and I suddenly had choices I'd never imagined. I picked a college far from home, one where no one knew my parents' names. On graduation day, I walked across the stage to accept my diploma, knowing I'd built my future on my own terms. When my speech ended, the applause was loud and long, but the real satisfaction came from knowing my success was the one thing my parents couldn't take from me. I left town the next week, packed car full of everything I owned, and didn't look back. For me, the best revenge wasn't shouting the truth. It was living a life so full and free that their lies no longer mattered. My sister once told me she loved me more than anyone. I believed her. We had grown up close, sharing secrets and dreams. That ended the day she got pregnant. At first, I thought we'd face the problem together, but she came to me with a plan that would turn my life upside down. She asked me to pretend I was the one who was pregnant so she wouldn't have to deal with the shame or question. I didn't agree right away, but she begged, swore it would only be for a little while. I finally gave in, thinking I was helping her. Almost immediately, the rumors started spreading. People at school treated me differently, and my boyfriend, who had been my biggest support, broke up with me. He said he couldn't handle the situation, even though I hadn't done anything wrong. I kept hoping my sister would be grateful, that she'd step in before things got worse. But one afternoon, I walked past her room and heard her laughing with her friends. She was bragging about how easy it had been to convince me and how dumb I was for going along with it. She even joked about how my life was falling apart while hers stayed the same. That was the moment I decided I wasn't going to stay quiet. I started carrying my phone everywhere, ready to record if she said anything. It didn't take long. A few days later, she told one of her friends, she actually thinks she's helping me. I'm never telling anyone the truth. I hit record and caught the whole thing. I waited for the right time. That came at a big family barbecue a few weeks later. Everyone was there, parents, cousins, aunts, uncles. My sister was laughing and chatting like nothing was wrong. I stood up, said I had something to share, and played the recording on a small speaker. The backyard went silent. You could hear her voice clearly, admitting the lie. My parents froze, my aunts and uncles started asking questions, and my sister's face drained of color. She tried to deny it, but the recording was too clear. My parents didn't know what to say. After that day, my sister's world changed fast. Her friends stopped coming around. Her boyfriend dumped her, embarrassed by the whole thing. Family members she used to charm avoided her. As for me, I got calls from relatives offering support, some apologizing for believing the rumors. One of my uncles, who had always been kind to me, offered to help me move out and start fresh. He gave me a place to stay until I found my own apartment and even helped with some of my school expenses. Leaving that house felt like taking a deep breath after years of holding it in. I knew my sister would have to live with what she'd done, and I didn't plan to stick around to watch. I had my own life to build. I waited years for the right moment to make things right, and that moment came on my sister's wedding day. She was marrying into a wealthy family, the kind that cared about appearances more than anything else. My parents were glowing with pride, acting as though nothing bad had ever happened in our past. But I remembered everything, how they made me pretend I was pregnant as a teenager to cover for her. When she asked me to be her maid of honor, I agreed without hesitation. She thought it was because I wanted to support her. In reality, I saw it as the perfect chance. Months before the wedding, I started digging through old boxes and files I'd kept hidden. I found the fake pregnancy photos, the texts between my parents and her, even an old recording of my mother admitting they'd forced me into the lie. I saved everything on a flash drive and kept a printed copy in my bag. The wedding day was perfect, at least on the surface. Flowers lined the aisle, guests filled the chairs, and my sister smiled like her life was flawless. I stood beside her, holding her bouquet, acting like the loving sister everyone thought I was. But when the reception came and it was time for my speech, I knew the real show was about to start. I began by thanking everyone for coming, speaking warmly about family and truth. Then I said, "There's something about the bride's past most of you don't know, but I think her husband and his family deserve to hear it before the night is over." The room went still. I pulled the flash drive from my pocket, plugged it into the projector, and pressed play. The first image was me at 16, wearing the fake pregnancy belly. Then came the texts between her and my parents, planning how I would take the blame. Finally, the recording of my mother's voice admitting the truth filled the room. Gasps echoed, chairs scraped the floor, and people began whispering. The groom's face went pale. His parents exchanged a look and stood up. Within minutes, guests were walking out, some shaking their heads, others glaring at my sister. She tried to explain, but no one seemed to want to hear it. By the end of the night, the wedding was in shambles. The groom's family demanded answers, and the reception ended early. Word spread quickly, and by the next morning, her perfect reputation was gone. As I left the venue, I felt lighter than I had in years. Justice had taken a long time, but it had arrived in the most public way possible. My parents and sister had wanted to bury the truth forever. Instead, it became the one thing everyone would remember. I walked out smiling, knowing I'd finally taken back my voice. The camera lights were warm on my face as I sat in the interview chair, a microphone clipped to my shirt. Across from me, the director asked me to start from the beginning. It was for a Netflix-style documentary about family secrets, and my story fit all too well. I talked about my parents' obsession with status. They wanted to be seen as the perfect family in every way, well-dressed, well-behaved, admired in the community. That image mattered more to them than truth or loyalty. So when my sister got pregnant as a young teenager, they saw it as a threat. Their solution was simple and cruel. Make me pretend I was the one who was pregnant. I explained how the lie took over my life. I lost opportunities one had worked years for. Friends drifted away, teachers looked at me differently, and I fell into a deep depression. It felt like my real self had been erased, replaced with a version they created to protect their own image. For years, I thought I'd never get the chance to clear my name. Then a friend from college who worked in film heard the full story one night over coffee. She was shocked and said, "People need to hear this." A few weeks later, she came back with a proposal. She wanted to make my story part of a new documentary series. The build-up took months. The crew interviewed my former teachers, neighbors, and even relatives who had believed the lie. Some cried on camera, apologizing for the way they'd treated me. Others admitted they'd suspected something was wrong, but hadn't dared to speak up. We filmed in the town where it all happened, using old photos and recordings I'd saved as evidence. When the documentary premiered at the local film festival, I sat in the back row, my heart pounding. The audience gasped in the right places, shook their heads in disbelief, and applauded when the truth came out on screen. By the time the credits rolled, my parents' faces were pale in the clips, their voices shaky in old recordings. The reaction was immediate. My parents were shunned in the community. Friends they'd known for years stopped returning calls. The story spread online, and soon it was trending nationwide. Messages poured in from people who had been through similar situations, thanking me for speaking up. The attention gave me a new path. I began working as an advocate for teens who had been manipulated or silenced by their families. I spoke at schools, youth centers, and conferences, telling my story not to dwell on the past, but to show others that they could fight back. For the first time, the lie no longer had power over me. The truth was out for the whole world to see, and I was finally free to live without it hanging over my head. What once broke me had become the thing that helped me rebuild my life completely.